Let's see if this recording starts. Okay, the recording has started. Okay, we're recording, everyone. I guess we'll get started. Do you want to just introduce yourself, Tommy? We can just do that quickly.
Yeah, hello. My name is Michael, aka Tommy, I guess. And I go to Seven Lakes. I'm a 10th grader, and I do PF indeed, if you didn't know.
No way. I thought you did like Congress.
I dabble in multiple events. Yeah.
Okay. I'm Vivian or Viv. I go to Bronx Science, and I'm also a sophomore. And we're going to be just talking about the new January topic. So our aim today is to make this topic lecture good for novices who need just like a very basic background of the topic, but also we're going to try to go in depth about arguments that are present on the circuit right now and what the current meta is, because I know some of you are on the varsity circuit or want more of an advanced topic lecture. So we're going to try to do a mix of both of that. And then if we didn't cover something that you want to know, we'll do a Q&A at the end. Yeah, okay. What time is it? It's 6:04. All right, we'll get started then. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So I guess, yeah, you want to start?
What is the NSA? Well, the National Security Agency is known for its data collection, processing, and I guess like privacy issues, but unfortunately it has gone through controversies in the past regarding specific privacy issues, such as in 2013 when John Snowden leaked that the NSA were looking at like everyone in America's information. Well, currently lots of people don't know how much about the NSA, other than that it spies in your information and tries to do counterterrorism. But some lay judges might know mainstream media information, such as Snowden movies or documentaries, which will be explained on the next slide or slides moving forward. And when expanding on ideas, with lays, you should keep this in mind. However, it might be easier than topics such as know for issues, because obviously NFU, like a nuclear program, is pretty hard to explain with lay judges comparatively, where security issues and maybe privacy issues are more, experienced in day-to-day life.
Yeah, so if you don't know the topic at all, it's if the National Security Agency, someone is not on mute, if the National Security Agency should continue spying on U.S. citizens and domestic residents. I don't think someone's on mute. It doesn't matter. Just make sure everyone's on mute, just so we can hear the best. I can force mute. I don't know. Anyways, the NSA, National Security Agency, it's part of the government. That's, I guess, like it's on the screen. They collect your data, and we'll go into more detail about that. But yeah, as I was saying on the bottom, a bunch of lay judges might know bits and pieces about the NSA. Like your everyday person doesn't know too much. All we really know is what Edward Snowden released in 2013, which we'll get to. So it's going to be a little easier to explain because people have like a general knowledge on what the NSA is, but like nobody really knows too much. It's okay, Rohan. Okay. So some key terms, things to know. Edward Snowden, you're going to hear about him a lot. He's the dude who leaked all the stuff about the NSA. Basically, the reason why we know the NSA actually like spies on US citizens is because of him. He was a whistleblower back in 2013. He was an or I guess now he is an ex-NSA worker. I forget like what exactly he did in the NSA, but I think he fled to Russia. So he's in Russia right now, but he's done a lot of TED Talks and stuff like that. He's the one who published everything we know. So the second thing you might want to know is the Patriot Act, which was signed by President Bush after 9/11. Basically, it created the backbone of the NSA and counterterrorism efforts, because after 9/11, the whole United States was basically like, okay, we need to crack down on terror efforts, because like this is now a big problem. We know that like a big act of terror can like actually happen. So the Patriot Act was signed, and there's a lot in the Patriot Act that has regards to the NSA, a lot that doesn't, but overall is very important for like counter-terror operations. All right. I mean, I can take the rest of the slide. Okay, so specifically what you might hear stuff about is Section 215 of the Patriot Act, which allows the government to obtain a secret court order requiring third parties, such as telephone companies, to hand over any records. So basically, what the NSA can do is they can get a secret court order through a court called the FISA court, which kind of manages everything. And it's a secret court, meaning that no one really has the documents or like the transcripts of what happens in these courts. So it's not like a public court where you can go online, you can find out like what exactly happened. It's all secretive. But what the NSA can do is they can get warrants, or they can get FISA warrants in order to get telephone records or tap data and things like that. So that's all part of Section 215 of the Patriot Act. And so a lot that you might hear about is if this section of the Patriot Act was repealed or not, because it means a lot to the topic, right? If so back in March, I think like every 4 years, I'm probably wrong on like how much time, but the Patriot Act, and specifically Section 215, has to continuously be renewed. And back in March, it wasn't renewed. So people are saying that it's no longer in place, so the NSA can no longer tap things like phone records. So it might mean a lot to the topic to think about, was Section 215 of the Patriot Act renewed? Can the NSA still tap phone records? Can they not? Because if they can't, then it's going to mitigate a lot of the offense on this topic. So was it repealed? Yes and no. Supposedly, it expired for like 3 weeks back in March. Some say it was renewed because the Congress renewed the USA Freedom Reauthorization Act, but some are also saying that in order for Section 215 to be officially renewed, that needs to go through the House and the Senate, which hasn't happened. So nobody really knows right now what's going on. So I'd recommend doing research on that, because A, it could be a good response, but then B, it could be something that you might want to look out for, because if you're reading some argument that relies on maybe the NSA getting like telephone data, that could be something that really harms your argument. You can take the next slide, Tommy.
So some more terms that you probably need to know is Section 702. And what Section 702 is basically is that it allows the surveillance of specific non-US people in order to obtain information about foreign threats. So for example, the reason why I guess like this section is very important for this topic is because it creates a lot more ground for arguments and allows for, I think, more higher scope of impacts. So for example, if we were to talk about a terrorism argument without this section, it would be specific to like US global stability and like US counterterrorism, which the impacts probably won't be as large compared to global stability and global terrorism impacts. So for example, the reason why this is important is because you're going to hear cards read throughout the topic that explain how in the process of spying against, or like spying on foreigners specifically in the US, the NSA collects like I guess a lot of the Americans, like the people that they're spying on, communications such as like emails and phone calls with other people in like other countries. And the reason why that could be good is because it allows the NSA to identify more information about people in other countries. And the way this is implicated specifically in Iran is that it's saying that the NSA not only collects domestic intelligence, but it also collects foreign intelligence at the same time. And the reason why foreign intelligence is necessary is because, for example, again, going back to the global stability example, it allows for like, terrorist, like, I guess, like precision, or like terrorist, like surveillance and catching like terrorists around the world. For example, yes, drone strikes. And yeah.
Yeah, so basically what Tommy says, that people might implicate Section 702 to basically be like, in order to have really good foreign surveillance, which is important, you need US surveillance, because the topic in the resolution, the scope is only for US surveillance. So even if you affirm the topic, you're still going to have technically foreign surveillance. But what either side can make the argument using this section is they can say, no, when you get rid of US surveillance, you're basically getting rid of a lot of foreign surveillance as well. So it just makes the scope of your argument better, but it also makes it harder to win your link, because then you're going to have to win this whole Section 702 is key to foreign surveillance in order to win any of your impacts. So, or it could be used as just like an impact magnifier, so you don't have to win that part of your link. So there are cool things you can do with that, but it's something to keep in mind.
And the reason why this is probably an important argument to know about is because it not only can be like used for global stability, but also for just like any argument that can reach more to like a global stability, which is just giving you a lot more, I guess, more offense and giving you impacts that can be easier to weigh against other impacts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a big portion of this topic comes about like hacking and cyber attacks and stuff like that. And I was scrolling on the Discord the other day, and someone asked what the difference between 0 days and a backdoor was. So I wanted to add this part to the slideshow to kind of talk about it. At the bottom of the slide, I think this just in general, this debate gets a bit confusing, and honestly, it's not too important to know the difference. But I was watching one round over during like the Blake round robin, and someone in Crossfire was like, "Isn't your card talking about just backdoors and not specifically 0 days?" So people might try to trick you up with the vocabulary. So I think this is something worth going over. So generally, 0 days is something you want to know on this topic. Is a vulnerability in some sort of computer software that is unknown to those who should be interested in mitigating the vulnerability. So if you are a company and there's a vulnerability in your software and you don't know about it, that's a 0 day. Like you would want to know about that and you'd want to be able to patch it, which means to fix the vulnerability so no one can hack into it. So what's the difference between a backdoor and a 0 day? So a backdoor can be two things. A, developers or companies can make purposeful entryways into their system. So in case they get locked out or in case there's any error, they have a way to go through a backdoor and into their computer system. But B, a malicious program or malware can be installed on the host system and it goes undetected. So let's say someone encrypts an email with like malicious code, right? And someone in this company opens up the email and downloads the virus or the malware, right? Now in this computer software, you have this virus which can open up a backdoor to other hackers. Now I know that might be complicated, and it is pretty complicated, but it's something you may want to know, and it's something you could trip your opponents up by using if their evidence, let's say, specifically talks about, I don't know, one of their pieces of evidence talks about backdoors in general, but then the other one, the next part of the link chain only talks about 0 days. Do they get full access into like their impact evidence or something like that? That's some cool way. Of course, that's like a more advanced way to go about it, but that's something cool you could do. So a little thing down here, all 0 days are backdoors. Every 0 day is a type of backdoor, but not all backdoors are 0 days. So kind of like how all eagles are birds, but not all birds are eagles, or like the square and rectangle example. I know people talk about that stuff a lot. I hope this wasn't too confusing, but all 0 days are a type of backdoor, but not all backdoors are 0 days. So if someone's evidence is talking only about 0 days, but then their like uniqueness is about backdoors, there might be some iffy parts in that link, and you might want to call them out on that.
And just to like summarize the difference, basically 0 days are any critical like software vulnerability, whereas backdoors are intentionally like placed by either security or sometimes a hacker or an outsider sneaks it into lines of code.
Mhm.
So I think the backdoors are just more intentional.
Yeah. And yeah. So I think overall, just the best term to use is vulnerabilities, because they both are technically vulnerabilities. And just in general, any evidence you have about vulnerabilities is going to just have this just be included in the argument. So 0 days are backdoors that need to be fixed immediately. 0 days are just a very dangerous part of backdoors because nobody really knows about them until they're discovered. And when they are discovered, they can be exploited. So they're not purposefully put there, or like a backdoor can turn into a 0 day because it can be then exploited, but not all backdoors are exploited, right? So some backdoors are useful for a company, so that wouldn't necessarily be a 0 day. It becomes a 0 day when the people who need to know about it don't know about it, and then it's then exploited. So if I'm like Microsoft, for example, and I don't know about this this 0 day in my software, but this hacker group does and they're exploiting it, that's a 0 day. But if I'm Microsoft and I intentionally know that there's this part, like this backdoor in my company, that's then not a 0 day.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very confusing, and I really don't think it's going to be a big deal, but it's just something that if you're running the argument, you may want to do more research into. But yeah. This is not too important as a part of the topic. Like, it's important to know what 0 days and backdoors are, but the difference between them is not that important. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So now we're going to go into like the arguments on the topic. Tommy, do you want to take pro and I can take con, or do you want to do the opposite, or
I'll
just like
jump around and talk about some.
Mhm.
So starting off with this information overload argument, it's basically where the NSA collects way too much information for it to collect accurate information. So it's like finding a needle in a haystack, basically, is the analogy that I guess people like to do. So The impact, I guess, off of that is a lot of people or a lot of teams could run the idea that because the NSA collects too much information, there's no accurate information, which means that it cannot stop terrorist attacks, which means that it's always better to either A, switch to a different program, or B, go to more human tracking and human intelligence, where we can actually collect the correct, like more necessary information than just collecting all information. The second argument here is,
I just want to expand on like information overload a bit. People will run the uniqueness that like right now the reason why there hasn't been any successful like stops in terrorist attacks, or like the NSA really hasn't done anything, is because there's information overload and there's so much data that the NSA is getting on a daily basis from the metadata that they're collecting. Oh yeah, metadata, that's something else important to know. I know this is like a little sidetrack, but metadata is just like general data. So if I'm calling Tommy at 11:50 p.m. to talk about pizza, right? What the NSA is going to collect is they're going to know that I called Tommy at 11 p.m., but they're not going to know we talked about pizza, right? Then they have to go to a court in order to get like some sort of warrant or some sort of like allowance to go beyond that metadata and get the content of that data. So know that Tommy and I were talking about, what was it, pizza? I forget what I said. Anyway, so because metadata, there's so much metadata, people are constantly texting, constantly emailing, constantly on social media. The NSA is collecting so much that it's so hard to actually find out who's a terrorist, who's dangerous, or what the information they actually need. All right, yeah, go on, Tom.
And the next argument that people could run is the Islamophobia / racism argument. And there's a couple of ways that people run this, I guess. Starting with the Islamophobia argument, it's normally where just that the NSA's information is biased, or like the NSA either A, the NSA's information is specifically biased, which is bad because now police or organizations are more targeted towards those types of people, or B, the NSA is the one that is giving the surveillance to the specific police, who then are more likely to be racially biased towards these types of people. And specific to more of the racism idea, there's a couple of arguments that fit under it, that, or like there's a couple of links that fit under it. The first is the Fourth Amendment argument, basically. It's about, I guess, drugs. And what it is that the police are now, because you get rid of like the NSA, the police are now less likely to do searches and seizures against people, which is, I guess, like violating the Fourth Amendment, because now in the future there's going to be more searches and seizures against specific like people of color, which is bad because now they get imprisoned more, which is bad because then there's more harm and more racism. And then, yeah, I think that's the only one I remember for now. But I think there is definitely more.
At Blake, I was neg 5 rounds out of 6 rounds, and every time we were neg, so all 5 rounds we were neg, we hit this argument. And so I think that it's a good argument depending on how you run it, because I think that a lot of the evidence talks about specifically like local police departments taking part of like the systemic racism or the actual problems. The evidence isn't a lot about how the NSA is actually racist in and of itself. So I think that if you are going to run this argument, the best link to go about it is the link that the NSA gives data to local police departments or the FBI, who are then, those are the racist institutions who are like perpetuating the systemic racism. Because a lot of the times my partner and I would just call for the evidence and their link would be about the NSA, but then there would be no internal link going to like their evidence, which was talking about like local police departments. So there would be a big hole there. So that's like how we would most of the time respond to that, just by saying like there's no way that changing what the NSA collects, or if the NSA can collect anything, actually changes any of like their impact evidence, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to go about it. But then I did at the Blake round robin, Marist OW ran the argument really, really well. There are a bunch of recordings of them running it. They ran it more as a K because they had to roll the ballot with it, but they ran it really well. And I think the way they ran it, if I'm remembering it correctly, is that like the NSA inherently, in the way that the ways and the algorithms of which they collect data, are racist because they target specific races or religions.
Yeah.
So there's also that link. I don't know if the evidence is good. I'm pretty sure it's good because Marist has pretty good evidence ethics. But yeah, so it's definitely a really good argument. It's a really true argument. It's a really important argument too. So a lot of people are running that. Of course, since all five times I was neg, we hit that argument when people were asked. So
Yeah,
a
we
lot
hit
of
that
people are
argument
running
a lot
that.
too. Yeah, and then the next argument that we have is this drones argument. We run this argument on the app. I think it's pretty good. And like I was explaining earlier, it starts off by explaining how Section 702 basically expands data not only domestically, or it basically says that the NSA not only collects domestic data, but also collects foreign data, which is good because when the NSA, I guess, like collects like metadata of specific people in foreign countries, it can feed into like algorithms which can more easily identify these terrorists. And this is good because you can avoid having, I guess, like troops for targeting, and instead, because you know specifically where these terrorists are, you can use more drone strikes, which can cause more precision. But without like the surveillance, the US would not risk American lives for this targeting. And nor would they, I guess, like carpet bomb drones, which is basically meaning that because like there's going to be a lot of backlash if they do any of that. And the problem is that if the US doesn't have like good surveillance, it would rely more on, I guess, like infiltration and I guess like flipping members. And the reason why that's like, I guess, important is because drone violence is, I guess, really, really bad, as I explained earlier, because it creates anti-American sentiment. And what happens is that it creates additional terrorist attacks, and maybe you need some empirical evidence about drone strikes creating additional terrorist attacks, but you can definitely find something like that. And then the terminal impact could just be either, I guess, like civilian deaths, or it could be even civil wars between, or terrorist like terrorist deaths, civilian deaths, or it can be like civil wars between organizations that we have. And so basically, yeah.
No, as I was going to say is there's good evidence on how American drone strikes have caused a lot of problems, specifically in the Middle East, where we've tried to intervene with drone strikes. There's been like civilian casualties. There's been like civil unrest. There's been terrorist groups who have like just like it been emboldened because of like the drone attacks. So there's a lot of stuff on that.
And basically on the app, it is basically saying that drone strikes are very, very bad because it leads to more terrorism. And the only way to get rid of drone strikes is where the NSA stops surveillance, because the NSA is currently targeting which like where the terrorists are, which is causing America to use drone strikes. But without them, then America won't be comfortable to just risk American lives, like put a bunch of troops on the ground, or just like throw random drone strikes anywhere and try and like find anyone, because they know it's going to lead to anti-American sentiment. And without drone strikes, there is always a better solution that you can find. And the reason why drone strikes are bad is because it creates like violence, more terrorist groups attacking, etc.
I think that on this argument, there's a lot of room for turns as well. That's why like I strayed away from running it. But I think that depending on like how you go, it could be a strategic argument to run. I think that there are turns such as like if we don't use drones as much, then we're going to be putting more troops in places because we kind of replace a lot of troops with drones. So you could say that's bad for like, I mean, the easiest way you could say it's bad is because of like military spending, but you could say it's bad because a lot of like the TOC topic from last year is about like why troops in the Middle East are like good or bad. So there's a lot of evidence about how troops, like actual physical troops, create like a lot of anti-American sentiment or even more violence. So it's a very like turn-heavy argument, but at the same time, there's that like a front line in there that if we're not going to resort to troops if we don't have drones, the drones are just going to be less accurate, which is even worse, right? So like it's I don't know. I don't know much about the argument, so I might have just been really confusing. I'm going to quickly touch on big tech, and then Tommy will continue down the list. So the big tech argument at the top is just that basically after Snowden leaked information that the NSA was like spying on all of us, a bunch of tech companies lost a lot of customers and lost a lot of investors because people in other countries didn't want to use American companies because they knew that American companies' data was going to the NSA. So, like, for example, even if you were like some random person in, I don't know, like Germany, right? But if you were using an American company, that data was then given to the NSA because the NSA could take all American company data. So people were under that fear and they were like, I don't want the US government knowing my data, so I'm not going to use American tech, right? So they switched to other like tech companies, maybe like ones in Europe or China, even though like that China one would be kind of stupid because China does even more surveillance than we do. But the other link to that is that investors got really freaked out too, because investors were like, oh, people are not going to want to use products that are then giving their data to the NSA. So we're going to shift our investment away from US tech and into tech from like the EU or I don't know, maybe Chinese tech, even though, again, that's kind of stupid because China is doing even more surveillance than we are. But the argument is just that like when tech companies lose money, like that's bad for US GDP. The argument's pretty stock. I know personally, I don't think it's like the best argument. I think there are a few turns people can say to why like US tech is bad. I know my partner prepped out this funny turn about capitalism. That's just because that's the stuff he likes to do. But there's turns about how like when investors don't invest in US tech, they invest in like European tech, which is better for like the global markets because European tech invests in like specific technology that's really beneficial. So there's a lot of turns you can do about why investing in US tech is bad. And then I also think it's just not a really good argument because on the uniqueness level, like right now we have the NSA, right? But US tech stocks are like the best they've ever been. So obviously if the NSA was that harmful to US tech stocks, the status quo wouldn't be occurring.
Yeah, and I think another issue with the argument is that just like a lot of the specific evidence is where like this big tech problem, this like big tech argument was a problem was either in 2013 or 2014 when the Edward Snowden leaks first came out, which is bad because there is contradicting evidence from much more recently where it's not that big of a problem anymore. So if you were to run it, I would say just like have good recent evidence.
Yeah, have good uniqueness. If you find good uniqueness, then the argument's fine. But it's pretty outdated in terms of like the actual effect that the NSA is having on big tech. Because A, people are forgetting about it. B, like obviously our U.S. tech is doing great right now. All right, so you want to go to the 0 days argument?
Yeah. This 0 days argument, like we were explaining earlier about 0 days, is where the NSA currently has 0 day exploitations, but they use it on their own, which means that they're not really sharing it with anyone else, which is bad because the discoveries by criminals could lead to more attacks specific to I guess like these like 0 day vulnerabilities can be exploited and used by any I guess like hacker or attacker. And what this argument is that whenever you I guess like end the NSA, obviously these attacks, it causes like the prevention of these millions of attacks by like ending the reason why the NSA is stockpiling these specific 0 days. So once you vote for the pro, that means that the NSA no longer has to stockpile all of these 0 days like weapons, and it can patch like these vulnerabilities. There's evidence that
I was going to say is the two most common links on app is that right now the NSA is really bad because they're doing two things. A, in order to collect metadata, they're creating 0 day vulnerabilities. So what they're doing is they are using their own malware to create backdoors into companies in order to take data. Or they're just creating backdoors, which don't have to be 0 days, where they're asking companies like, hey, can you create a vulnerability for us to collect data through? So because they need to collect metadata, they're either creating their own exploits and getting backdoors into companies, or they're making companies open up their own backdoors for the use of the NSA, right? So there's two ways that they're creating them. And then those backdoors can be exploited by hacker groups. But then second, they are finding zero-day vulnerabilities that already exist in company software, but instead of telling the company like, hey, you have a backdoor or vulnerability in your software, you should probably patch that. They're hiding it and they're not telling these companies because they think, oh, we can use this for ourselves. We can collect even more data through just not telling this company. Is if we tell this company and they patch the vulnerability, then we can't collect data through it anymore.
Mhm.
So it's basically saying that the NSA is bad because they're allowing for these vulnerabilities that hackers can then exploit. And there's a variety of different impacts you can do from this. The most common one is like infrastructure. So that like hacking into US infrastructure, company infrastructure. There's just a lot of impacts. You can do one about like companies losing money. You can do one about the banking sector shutting down from like hackers. There's even like impacts about like power grids shutting down and that like creating like starvation or like water sources being shut down. There's a lot of different impacts that people are running. But then again, there's this exact same argument on the neg, which creates a lot of clash in the round, which can either be a really good thing if you're able to weigh your argument well, but it could also be a really bad thing.
Then the, I guess, final common AF argument is the democracy / privacy argument. And I think this was first run by Lakeville at the straight round robin. The argument is basically that currently democracy is plummeting, specifically because, well, I guess there's like, I guess, multiple links to it. The first link, I guess, is that I remember is just about internet freedom. And what happens is that there's evidence that explains that how an open internet allows countries to move towards more democratic governments. And there's like historical examples of where this is true because it makes things such as revolutions, I guess, like faster because now more people are connected to each other. So more people know what other own citizens are doing, which can cause more, I guess, like revelations about what's going on in their country. And there also is evidence about how ending this type of surveillance will create like a resistance to censorship, I think, and how the NSA's data collecting and wiretapping makes like authoritarian leaders easier to, I guess, like carry out their own agenda, which is bad because now there's going to be more authoritarianism in specific countries where data collection increases. And
I was gonna say, I think the yeah, that's definitely a link about internet freedom, and I think the other link is just like modeling, right? When we kind of give the AOK that like, hey, surveying on your citizens is an okay norm, right? The US, who's like the preacher of freedom and like democracy, when they're surveying on their citizens, obviously other countries are going to interpret that as, okay, if the leader of democracy and the leader of freedom is saying that surveying is okay and democratic, then we can do that. But what other countries do is they take that out of proportion, right? So they're like, okay, the US is doing this, we're going to do it too, but we're going to do it even more extreme, right? We can maybe take this surveillance and move it to censorship, not just like surveying for metadata, but we're going to survey for content of data without getting warrants. And then also we're going to start censoring people. So the argument is just that like when we have the NSA and we continue to collect our own citizens' data, other countries model after us, but then do it a bit more extreme, which can lead to like authoritarian governments.
Yeah, and the impact towards the sort of authoritarian governments is that there could be more proxy wars, and a lot of times authoritarian governments like that impact can like has a lot of prereqs to other impacts such as like racism and like quality of life, because usually through more authoritarian governments the quality of life and the treatment of others becomes worse. So if you can access that impact, it can link into a lot of other impacts that other teams run.
I think that the argument's pretty good for tech judges. I just don't think it's a good lay argument.
Yeah.
Because I don't think like your everyday like mom judge is going to be like, okay, we have the NSA, every country is going to like become authoritarian. I don't know, it may work for lay judges if you're that convincing, or if they're like a good lay judge and they take what you say for the truth and they're not like truth over tech. But I think it's actually a pretty decent argument when it comes to the flow, because I think that there is a lot of good weighing, as Tommy said. Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of good weighing against the neg arguments that are out there. All right, I think we'll go over like questions at the end if you have any more, but I think that's like it for the pro. Then talk about the most common neg arguments. So the first on here is about like hacking. So this is like the 0 days argument on AF, but it's on neg. Basically what it's saying is that the NSA, wait, what was I gonna say? Yeah, the NSA finds 0 day exploits and then they patch. Tommy, are you muted?
No.
Okay, it was just like weird cackling. Oh, you might want to mute. Who knows? Anyways, so what the NSA does is they find these 0 day exploits and then they patch them, or they don't specifically patch them, but they tell companies about the exploits and then the companies can then go patch them. And there's this really good piece of evidence that's like the NSA discloses 0 day vulnerabilities 91% of the time. So they're telling companies about the exploits in their systems 91% of the time. And so this argument is just saying that the NSA is good for patching 0 days. There's another link on this argument that's about AI, which is basically that the NSA helps create or make AI more efficient by feeding their metadata to AI software, which makes them like better in the long run. And then what that AI does is that AI is able to block hackers from attacking. Now that's a more like unique link in the argument, but I actually think it's a decent link if you decide to go that route. It's a pretty decent link. You may be subject, if you hit like a team that has a lot of back files, to AI bad turns. I don't think it's going to be that common, especially if you're in a very lay or local circuit. But if you hit like teams who have back files or just like to be fun, you know, there's a lot of literature out there about how AI is bad. I don't think it's a big threat, but it's something to keep in mind. We'll get more into like how 0 days plays out on AF and neg in a future slide. But do you want to take pandemics? Or I can take pandemics.
I would love to take pandemics.
Yes, you can take it.
Yeah. Pandemics, I really like the arguments. And how it works is that the uniqueness level is you have to explain why either A, the next outbreak is going to arise specifically inside the United States, and there's some evidence that says that's going to happen, or B, you need to explain why the NSA's, I guess, protection is important for global outbreaks. And there's also evidence for that. So you can go either one of those two routes, whichever you think is easier to prove and whichever you think has the better evidence, I'd say you should go for that one. But specifically about how the NSA helps solve pandemics, there's a lot of evidence that says that NSA surveillance can help prevent infectious diseases from ever becoming pandemics in the first place because of things such as contact tracing, new technological advancements such as like GPS enabled smartphone or like smartphone tracking, things such as like, I guess like social media like algorithms, and just like how the NSA can collect a lot of precise information. And what that does is that I guess like there, even to add on even like more uniqueness evidence, there's also evidence out there that says that for example, like if people said that, oh, so why didn't the NSA do anything to stop COVID? Well, they can be like, well, COVID, there's evidence that says that COVID was is a, I guess, like step up to where people realize, policymakers realize how important this type of surveillance is, which means that surveillance is only going to increase inside the future, and the NSA is only going to do more surveillance in the future because they realize how important it is, not only politically but also economically. And there's also evidence about empirics where NSA was successful containing other viruses. And yeah, and obviously there's a pretty big impact to pandemic prevention because it can kill a lot of people, depending on what evidence you find and who you like to cite. And also another thing good about pandemics is that it does have like a lot of good weighing, not only because of the amount of people it affects, but obviously because a lot of things go wrong during a pandemic. So you can link it back into the economy because during a pandemic, obviously the economy decreases, or you can link it back into like the racism argument you're talking about on the AF, because during a pandemic, governments are less likely to care about like those types of issues.
Yeah, I think that this argument is really good for lay judges because, again, like people are living in a pandemic right now. Unless you get like a, I don't know, anti-vax lay judge or something, um, or the one who's like hyper against, I don't know. But anyways, like it's a good argument because people are living in a pandemic and know how like bad the pandemic is. And if people come up there and say like, oh, if the NSA is so good, why hasn't it stopped the pandemic? What Tommy said, you can say like, people haven't realized that we actually need like pandemic prevention services, right? COVID is like the starting point. Biden knows that in his presidency, in the
Yeah.
next like 4 years, he's going to have to do things and change how we respond to pandemics. But then also, like the reason why we weren't able to use the NSA is because Trump didn't want to take that route. And so now that Biden's going to be in office, he's going to use the NSA more as a tool. And I
Mhm.
think this argument also has good empirics. Look into Taiwan specifically if you want to run this argument, because Taiwan, they use their own domestic surveillance
Surveillance.
program in order to like do contact tracing and enforce quarantines. And they've had like 7 deaths, I think, in total or something crazy like that, which is insane. Like they've been doing really well using their
Yeah.
surveillance in order to like stop pandemics. Oh,
An empiric is like a historical example of something that can support your argument.
yeah.
So, for example, just like Viv just said, a historical example of surveillance, of data surveillance working is in Taiwan, where because Taiwan used data surveillance, only 7 people died from COVID compared to other countries who did a lot worse.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think it's a pretty good argument. I didn't think it was a good argument at first, but I kind of like it now. The most like common or stock argument on this topic is terrorism. There's kind of 3 ways you can go about it. You can say that US data collection helps prevent like domestic terror attacks. So there's this evidence that like 50 possible domestic terror attacks were stopped by the NSA. I'll talk about why that evidence is terrible in a second. But that's the evidence most people use on this argument, is that like domestic terror attacks uh, are stopped because the NSA is able to collect data. If people are planning an attack over social media or text, the NSA is allowed to collect that data and able to preemptively stop that from happening, because that's what the NSA was set out to do. That's what the Patriot Act was set out to do after 9/11, was to stop these terrorist attacks from occurring. And so specifically, the collection of US citizen data was meant to prevent domestic terror attacks. And some people do the implication that these domestic terror attacks are mostly like right-wing white terrorist groups that commit a lot of like hate crimes and stuff like that. So that gives you a good link into maybe some arguments on AF, such as the racism argument, because you can say that like, oh, if the NSA is helping prevent like hate crimes, which are literally like killing people just for their identities, like obviously that has like a big implication on that argument. I think that there's more weighing you have to do there, but there are some like decent linkins. But then again, with Section 702, which we were talking about earlier, you can kind of magnify the impact because on hand, the topic's just talking about like surveillance on US citizens. So obviously there's not a lot of examples of the NSA actually like stopping a terror attack. But when you add the Section 702 stuff in about how like we need US surveillance to stop foreign terror attacks, there's a lot more you can get out of that, because you can say like maybe US surveillance was crucial on like stopping ISIS or Al Qaeda, stuff like that. You can get a bigger scope on your argument. On the whole empiric about 50 terrorist attacks being stopped, I don't recommend using that evidence because the director of the NSA came out and said it was false later, but then I'm pretty sure like there's other evidence that says they haven't stopped any attacks. Basically, like that empiric is just proven not to be true. The director of the NSA came out and said it was fake, so it's not that good. Um, and the last thing on here is the circumvention argument. This is more of an advanced argument. So if you want to run something cool and like kind of unique, here's like the way you're gonna do it. Basically, the argument is it's kind of like, I don't know, how do I explain it? So basically, the argument is like when we get rid of the NSA, US surveillance is not going to go away, right? The government inherently wants to survey on citizens, so it's going to continue doing that. It just might happen under a different name or a different organization. So what Neg is saying is, even if you get rid of the NSA in the AF world, right, surveillance is still going to exist. However, it's going to be so much worse because either A, surveillance goes to the private sector, or B, it goes to the FBI. And there are unique impacts off of each of those. So like, oh God, Leon's here. Hi, Leon. So A, if it goes to the private sector, people can say that that can be used to like perpetuate like companies using surveillance for like their own interests and like create more monopolies and just like it can just magnify a lot of bad impacts. Or B, with the FBI, you can talk about how the FBI is bad or the FBI having surveillance is bad for a lot of reasons. I think that this argument could be really strategic because it allows you to link into most arguments and then magnify those impacts, right? Because if you have an argument about, I don't know, let's say authoritarianism, right? When you have something like the private sector, which is less regulated and more like, I don't know, I guess harmful to society, and you have a bunch of companies like running how we do things and running and knowing everything everyone does, like then you can link in to, I guess, these impacts in the same way, then you can do weighing about how that's worse. I know that Charlotte Ladin IS ran a sole contention about circumvention at the Blake round robin. So there's a lot of recordings out there. I'd recommend watching those if you're interested in the argument. It's a cool argument, but it also means that if you commit to this argument, you kind of have to commit to it because a lot of arguments on neg don't really work well with the circumvention argument. They kind of contradict themselves. So if you're going to run it, make sure that any other arguments or any other disadvantages you're running don't don't contradict the argument. Yeah. So Marina is exactly right in the chat. Could you link it to discrimination through the FBI point? We actually, Carson and I did this in one of our rounds. We read circumvention as a disadvantage, where we said that when the NSA no longer exists, then the FBI is the one doing surveillance, and that's inherently worse for like racial issues because the FBI is the ones who are actually imprisoning people because of their race or because of like other predetermined like prejudices and stuff like that. Anyways, yeah, it's a good link, and there's a lot of Lincolns you can do with the circumvention argument. And we read it as a DA because we kind of just dropped case, but yeah, I don't know. But yeah, is it probably more strategic to read these both as DAs? Yes, if it doesn't contradict your case, right? We dropped case, so even if it did contradict our case, it was fine. Because in the round we read it as a DA, we were hitting Hackley YK, who were running a K, and so we just dropped case and went for the DA because I thought that was the most strategic thing to do. I mean,
a DA stands for a disadvantage. Yeah, no, it stands for disadvantage. And what it is, it's like sort of an off case argument. So it doesn't really interact with your opponent's case. It sort of is another independent argument, as if you were to read a sort of another contention inside your case, but you didn't have time to read it in case, so you read it, for example, in rebuttal.
Exactly what Tommy said. It's unlike a turn, which is directly interactive with an argument that your opponents read, but also acts as offense for you. A DA is offense for you, but it's not exactly interactive with your opponent's argument. You have to make it interactive, so you have to do extra analysis or extra weighing off of that, just like any argument from case would be.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it works as a DA as long as it doesn't interact with your case that much. So we ran pandemics, for example, on neg. So the analysis that we would make if we read the FBI circumvention as a DA, but then still read pandemics as case offense, is I'd make the argument that it doesn't matter if the FBI is still doing surveillance. They can't do pandemic control because they don't have like the federal power to do so. It's kind of iffy there, but that's some sort of implication you can make if the other team gets up there and they're like, this whole circumvention point like contradicts your case offense, you know? When would you bring up a DA? People read DAs in rebuttal. Some people say that reading DAs in second rebuttal is abusive. I don't think it's that abusive, but people read DAs in rebuttal.
you recommend reading?
I'll get to these questions in a bit. I just want to get on to the next slides real quick. Oh, someone asked me, people run Ks and PF, how often? It's becoming more and more of a norm. People aren't running like intense Ks like Baudrillard. Am I pronouncing Baudy right? Baudrillard Ks or whatever. People don't really run those on the actual like circuit. People run them in like practice rounds and stuff. But actually on the circuit, it's becoming more and more of like a popularized thing. Oh, so what is a K? I'm pretty sure Sean Wallace is going to be doing a lecture later on K debate. They already did a lecture. I'm pretty sure it's on like Beyond Resolve Georgia's YouTube channel. I can like link that for you after this lecture is over. It's on identity Ks specifically, but I'm pretty sure for this lecture series, they're going to be doing, critique debate lecture. I think they are going to be doing one. I'll have to talk to them about it, but I'll let you know. I'm pretty sure there's some place on the spreadsheet where it talks about that. Okay, wait, I'm just gonna move on. So I'll go through this kind of quickly because I wrote this slide really last minute. What is the meta right now? So for anyone who's debating on the circuit or planning to debate this topic on the circuit, the straight round robin disclosure page on the wiki set kind of the meta for Blake. And then at Blake, the meta seemed to be cyber on both sides, racial issues, because of course I hit that 5 times in a row on AF, and then pandemic or terror on neg. I think that's kind of the meta right now. And then the Blake round robin allowed teams to kind of experiment even more with more unique arguments. So there were Ks being read all over the Blake round robin. There was an imperialism K ran by Walt Whitman. There was a fem K, I forget who ran it exactly. Or like Charlotte Latin, for example, ran an entire circumvention neg, which brought that argument kind of into the meta. There are a lot of interesting routes I think that this topic can take as it progresses, and a lot of unique arguments that will be developing as the topic progresses. I think that what we just covered are kind of the base links that people are going to be running, and that's what the meta is right now. Yeah. I don't know. Tommy got further at Blake than I did. So Tommy, you know a bit more about the meta.
Interestingly enough, there are, I guess, I would agree with mostly everything here. Think that there is sort of a pandemic argument that was read at Blake that I didn't hear about before. And how it goes is the NSA, I'm not exactly sure the argument goes, but it's sort of like the NSA is on the app, and it says that the NSA is bad for like international cooperation for some specific reason. I don't know specifically what the warrant is. And it's saying that international cooperation is key to stopping the next pandemic. And if that argument is read, then there's a lot of cool weighing that can be due on pandemics on the neg and the app and how they can interact with each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of more routes that are going to become more and more meta as the topic progresses throughout January. I think a cool route that you could look into is something called the Five Eyes organization. Five Eyes is a bunch of countries. I think specifically it's like Germany, Britain, France, US, and like New Zealand or something. It's like countries, there's 5 eyes, 9 eyes, and 12 eyes. And it's basically just like a surveillance group, like an international surveillance group alliance between a bunch of countries. And some people say that the US shares data with them. So maybe that strengthens the alliance, or maybe that alliance is bad. There's stuff to look into there. I think that's an interesting route that I want to look into more. I haven't really done much research into it, but I think that's a route you could go. There's just a lot of cool things that the topic's going to bring. I think it's actually a decent topic. It's not my favorite, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I don't know. I'll get to more questions at the end. I just want to get through the slides as we have it. Okay, I want to quickly go through this, and then Tommy has the slides. Okay, what I think about this topic is I think that prereqs and Lincolns are back. For the NFU topic, there was a lack of this type of weighing throughout the entire topic. I don't think I once did any sort of like prereq or Lincoln. No, I did a bit of Lincoln weighing, but I did like no prereq weighing throughout the whole no first use topic. And I really hated that because it's my favorite type of weighing to do. I think it's the most fun. But I think on this topic, there are a lot of opportunities for prereqs, but specifically Lincoln's. So for example, econ linked into terror. So when there's some sort of economic decline, that produces terror, because when there's more economic instability, more terrorist groups rise up, specifically like internationally, big terrorist groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda, not only from like government, like not from disliking the government, but also from like economic factors that creates like a bunch of terror. But that also works vice versa. You can do weighing on the opposite side, that like terrorism creates economic decline, because when there's so much instability because of terrorists, like that starts to like really damage the economy. There's less foreign direct investment, because investors are afraid to invest in countries where there's a lot of like terror happening. So that's really cool Lincoln weighing you can do. Another sort of Lincoln weighing you can do is that authoritarianism links into terror, but also vice versa kind of works too. You can say that in authoritarian regimes, there's a lot of like anti-government sentiment, so that you're going to see uprising and like terrorist groups start to create in order to like counter this government. So when there's more authoritarianism, you're going to see more terror. But then on the other side, you can also say that like when there are a bunch of terrorists, authoritarian governments are created because they want to counteract that terror, and that can only happen through like a strict government. So that's also weighing you can do. And then the weighing that we were talking about earlier, where how pandemics harm people of color the most because of just like systemic issues in society, such as like when we're in a pandemic, less focus is on things like welfare, but then also like people are laid off from their jobs a lot during pandemics. And because of like racial biases, a lot of like job owners lay off people of color first, which is why like empirically you're seeing like during this pandemic, it's harming people of color like a lot. So there's weighing you can do there too. I think that the weighing debate becomes really interesting on this topic.
I would agree. My good friend Jay-Z once told me that if you think about it hard enough, there should be a prerequisite for every single argument with like and how they can link with each other.
All right, I'm gonna let Tommy take this next slide because I was doing a lot of talking.
Oh, here are some strategy and tips that everyone should use, not only on this topic, but for every topic that you debate throughout your career. Firstly, don't go for too many arguments in the round. You should develop your argument enough where at the end of the round, your argument is built up enough and can be explained enough where no matter who the judge is, they should be able to understand it. And the key to doing this is just the second reason and the first reason go hand in hand is just to not read a lot of arguments and instead take your time to more explain the arguments you're reading in order to not be more confusing. So a good way to think of this is that you should speak more sort of in paragraphs rather than like one-line sentences, if that makes sense. Like speak in paragraphs and not like just like without like words. Then the third reason is that you should be able to do a lot of weighing between arguments. For example, in the last slide, pandemics link into harms for minorities. And yeah, just like weighing is a huge way to win rounds because weighing is basically explaining why your argument is a lot better than theirs. And if you can do that, then as long as you win your argument, then you can win the entire round. The last thing you want to do is you want to make sure you can create front lines to every argument you hear against yours. So after each round, talk with your partner and be like, what front line, what responses did they read to our arguments? And you want to make sure that you can brainstorm front lines to respond to every one of those arguments, and then eventually use those brainstorm ideas and then find evidence to support those ideas. So you can have front lines, have adequate front lines and responses to every argument that your opponent reads against you, against your own argument.
All right, so this last slide actually brings a question that I just got in the chat. So about the K ground on this topic, there is a lot of K ground. If you don't know about Ks, don't worry, there'll be another lecture on this. But if you do know about Ks and you're interested, I don't really know much about Ks. I really don't know much, but from what I do know that there is K ground, because a K was read against me on this topic, and I know that a lot of Ks were run at the Blake round robin. So someone asked me, how is the imperialism K run on this topic? Is it AF saying the NSA brings in US hedge, which is bad? I'm actually not sure, but what I do know and what I did hear is that Walt Whitman DP ran an imperialism K, and I can try to find the link now, but I'll put it in the Discord or something later. someone made a list of all the Blake and Blake round robin recordings and the teams that were competing on it. So that's like you'll be able to find some videos on that. I know they ran at Imperialism K. I'm not too sure. Tommy, do you know how they ran it?
I don't.
Yeah,
I
I'm
do
sorry, I
not.
don't know. I just know they ran it. So two other questions we got. I'll let Tommy take the one about internet fracturing, and I'll take the econ impact one. Tommy, do you want to go first?
This internet fracturing argument. Do you want to explain how it works?
I think it's like the one about like how the NSA can like target like the internet, right? Is that what you mean by that? Because there are a few arguments surrounding the internet. I mean, in the meantime, I'll go on to the next question while Griffin writes that out. How do you get an econ impact again? I think the main way that people are getting econ impacts on this topic is through the hacking arguments or
Yeah.
0 days argument. People are running that. What these hackers are going to do is they're going to use these 0 day exploits to hack into things like the banking sector or US critical infrastructure, which brings a
Right.
lot of economic harms. So, like, specifically, if the banking sector is hacked, there's going to be like trillions lost. Or like GDP is going to decline, or people are saying that if like a power grid is hacked, then like a bunch of like factories and stuff are going to be shut down, which causes GDP to decline. That's the main way people are getting econ impacts. But I think the other way people are getting econ impacts is the big tech argument on AF, saying that like US tech is going to, like US tech stocks and US tech competitiveness is going to decrease with the NSA, or is decreasing with the NSA. So that's where I got the econ impact stuff from. Also, yeah, this is a time for a Q&A because we're kind of done with the slides. So any questions for either of us?
How would you link hacking args into lives? So there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can say, so you can either A, go to the economy, or B, just link straight into lives. So for example, a lot of times when you go to the economy, you can say that it puts this many people in poverty. And there's evidence that says that poverty is like a #1 contributor to like deaths because the quality of life goes down, and you have a lot more issues. So that's like one way you can link into deaths. I'm not sure if there's specific evidence for people who specifically run it straight into deaths, and I'm not really sure how you do that. I guess like specific to hacking, I think that cybersecurity is definitely like a way, like specific to like the 0 days argument, like the backdoor hacking argument, like on companies. I think that the economy into deaths is like the only way to go. But I think that more specific to the overall idea about cybersecurity, and how like other countries are attacking us, and like bigger like scale hacks, there's definitely a way to link that into deaths because there's evidence that says that without like a lot of powerful deterrence, other countries can target our critical infrastructure, which could lead to like, I think we ran the Straub evidence that says that it could cause the same death toll as somewhere as like a nuclear attack. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, so the main way that people are linking it to lives is stuff about like the power grids or like critical infrastructure. So if you debated the OCO's topic last year, that was the most common like neg argument, was about like hacking into power grids. And so a lot of impact evidence is out there about how like a large scale attack on critical infrastructure could kill like billions of people or millions of people from a variety of reasons. There's so many warrants. Like I remember there was some sort of like attack on like, it was not Cincinnati. It was some like big country had like some critical infrastructure like attacked by a hacker, and it like shut down like water, like what's it called? Water, not cleansing, filtering, I don't know, like water filtration, and like people weren't able to get clean water for a little bit. So that's like some warranting you could do. There's a lot of evidence out there, and someone sent some in chat about like who could die from like infrastructure, like a big.
We had another question.
Yeah.
For the 50 cases terrorism evidence, since it's bad, how would we back up? What are other examples that NSA solves to prevent terrorism? I am not too sure, but
From what I remember doing research, there was like a Zazi bot. I don't know if I'm correct on this whatsoever, it was just like a card I read about like some like New York City subway bombing, and of course because you could look into this. I don't know. I live in New York City. I don't really know much about it. I don't remember any of this happening, but there was some sort of like subway bombing apparently that was like prevented from happening because of the NSA. I
Or
might
you
be
can just,
wrong.
or you can go for the idea that,
Oh, yeah. Do you want to go?
I don't know, you can go.
I was gonna say like the best link to go for Leon. Oh my god, the best way to do the terror link is basically say that the reason why there hasn't been any
Yeah, that's
prevention of
what I was gonna
terrorist
say.
attacks is
Yeah,
because the NSA acts as deterrent. Terrorists know that if they like start to plan an attack, then they're gonna be caught by the NSA, right? Like that's the reason why the NSA hasn't caught any terror attacks is because no terror attacks have happened because like it's deterred large scale attacks. So like
yeah.
that's why we haven't had a big terror attack since 2001.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of the 50 thing is so bad. There's so many indicts on it.
Yeah.
Literally the director of the NSA came out and was like, this isn't true. So yeah. Any serious questions that's not Leon asking what a contention is? Any more serious questions or we will wrap up?
Do what the team I ran. Oh.
Just ignore Leon.
Either. You can use either, Leon.
I'll quickly go over the authoritarianism argument again. Basically, there's kind of two links. You can talk about how like you can talk about domestically about how like the NSA might like lead the US towards being more authoritarianism or less democratic because like the US wouldn't be following the Fourth Amendment, which you can say has like other ramifications, or you can say that domestically that like right now the US is declining in democracy and it's like because of our surveillance. But I think the best link into it is what we were talking about earlier is about how when the NSA when the US, who is like the preacher of democracy and freedom, basically says that the NSA is like an okay thing and like gives an a-okay to like domestic surveillance, other countries model after that and think like, oh, it's okay if I do it too, but they kind of extremify it.
Yeah. No, please do not turn your camera on.
Okay,
Also,
Rohan said
one
thanks
more
for the lecture. Thank
question.
you.
You said that, what do you think on internet fracturing arcs? Oh, Griffin, can you explain what, like the internet fracturing arc is?
Yeah, Griffin, if you can explain what you mean by that, we can answer. How is drone strikes run on neg? It's the same link, but you're saying that drones are a good thing. I'm pretty sure that's the
Yeah,
case.
you're saying drones are comparatively better than any other solution that the US would have, basically.
Because like you can say troops create more anti-American sentiment or more
Yeah.
problems, and there's a bunch of arguments there from the TOC
Yeah.
topic from last
Or
year.
you could, or there's just an argument that says that drone strikes can like just kill terrorist leaders, which means that terrorist organizations are unable to like reproduce and conduct attacks, which is good because blank, right? And impact. So there's like two ways to go about it.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording because I think like, here, bye recording, bye.